had these kids in these really cool poses. They were football players and cheerleaders. They looked like somebody I wanted to be like. And so I think what I realized was that those book covers were drawing those kids in because of the way that they look. So I think that's important. The girls would line up, Miss McCalla, do you have another Kamani True? So when I start working on my book, I wanted to pick somebody that I thought that the kids would love to be like. And I think that's important. So those images out there of the science fiction covers where you have a nerdy looking person or someone, people want to be the jock. They want to be the cool person, yes. And so they want to somehow associate with that. And so you have to do that marketing, because if you don't, then people are turned off by it. And so I think African Americans tend to be much more visual, and they like certain things to look a certain way, and they know that's for them.
Okay, so I'm a writer, but I'm also a photographer. When I come up with a cover, it's my picture that I took. And so because the name of it is Small Town Planet Earth, it's about expanding awareness or consciousness. This is a shot that I took at some point, and I stretched it in Photoshop. Because I think it's interesting how things come together. It's writing, but it used to always bother me when people would say art and photography. So I have another agenda. My agenda is to give props to photography the same way as props is given to art. I mean, this is art. So, and regarding how we got into science fiction, I had written the book, and it was science fiction, but it didn't intend to go that way. I didn't really know where it was going as I was writing. It just went that way. But I really got into it because my nephews, they read science fiction. And one day, my nephew was moving, and he said, "Will you hold these books?" And I had this whole bookcase of all these books. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Because other than Stephen King and Octavia Butler, I didn't really touch it. And my father was dying, and I said, I was in Atlanta, I had to go to New York to be there with him. And so I grabbed some books off the shelf. I grabbed the thickest books, because when you're in the hospital, what do? You sit for hours with a person who's sick. So I said, I grabbed the thickest books, and I said, oh my goodness, apparently I picked some of the best books on the shelf, and I was hooked after that.
Question, Milton. Charles Saunders, the author of the Immoral series of novels, Dosuye and now Dambala, is the undisputed father of the Sword and Soul subgenre of speculative fiction, and you are the undisputed godfather. So, what exactly is Sword and Soul? We've heard you mention it. And for the rest of the panelists, do any of you all write or publish Sword and Soul or other subgenres such as Afrofuturism, urban horror, and so on?
Sword and Soul is basically a heroic fiction or sword and sorcery that is based on African culture, tradition, mythology, and history. About 30 years ago in 1974, Charles Saunders wrote the first Immoral story, which was his character. Immoral was basically positioned to be kind of like I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Conan, but he was supposed to be kind of like a African answer to Conan. And Charles basically published 2 books, and the third one was never released, but it's been released recently. I encountered Charles really by chance. I actually wrote my first book, Meji, and Meji Book 2, and Changa Safari. I had no idea that Charles Saunders existed. I just kind of went through the same process he did. I read Conan, I said this needs to be black, and I started writing my own stuff. And I first came across something that he wrote in a short story collection called Dark Matter. And he had a story in there called Gimli's Song, which was about the Soye. And I went on the internet, started trying to find him, but I couldn't find him. And I wasn't able to find him until Nightshade re-released his books. And then stuff about him was everywhere. And I got in contact with Nightshade, and I said, please give this guy some information, I want to talk to him. And nothing happened. But then I was on a site called Black Superhero, which is a site about black comic books. And one of the guys on the site mentioned that he was going to be, that Charles' books had been dropped by Nightshade, and that he was going to be picking up the publisher. So I got in contact with that guy, and he got me in contact with Charles, and ever since we've been basically working together, you know, reading each other's manuscripts and stuff like that. But that basically what Sword and Soul is. It's African-based fantasy type work, mainly heavy on the action. As far as definition of it, that's the reason why we let out the recent book, Griots, is because we wanted to bring other writers into the fold and have them express what their interpretation of Sword and Soul is. We ran into people who had written stories like this and never got them published, people who wanted to write stories like this but didn't because they didn't think they could get them published, and people who just enjoyed it and never thought about writing and wanted to take a stab at it. So it's a small subgenre, but we've got a good feeling about it, especially since we let Griots out, and we have a lot more people paying attention to it, a lot of people that we didn't realize that were keeping an eye on what's going on, and they're starting to come out of the shadows and saying, yeah, we've been watching you guys for a little while now, and you know, it seems like this is something that's pretty interesting. The best compliment we can get is when one day one of the major publishers lets out a Sword and Soul book, because then we know that we're digging in their pocket a little bit, and they want to get some of that back. So, so that's kind of like a backhanded compliment.
Don't even remember what was the question. Yes, we publish a lot of subgenres: urban fantasy, urban horror, every steampunk, urban steampunk. I mean, it's super futuristic, dark, super futuristic. I mean, we publish all the subgenres as well.
To tell you all the honest truth, I never heard of Sword and Soul until last week when I bought the book. And I did read Milton's story, and it was phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. I have to say, I am a big Terry Brooks fan, and I love Lord of the Rings. And when I saw read the books and saw the movie, I didn't even know that it was possible to have that African culture in there. So I think that it's probably something that's going to really take off, because there are a lot of people out there who like those types of stories. I don't write that type, but I'm more into futurism, science fiction, and paranormal.
Okay, I have not had a chance to read this yet. I've been traveling like crazy. I just came back into town yesterday, actually. But it does sound like, the guy, I can't think of his name, Goodman, I think. Yeah.
A lot of our stuff would be, you know, even when I describe it, I kind of use other places as reference. Like when I describe Meji Book 1 and Book 2, I say basically think about Lord of the Rings, but something in an African setting. And when I talk about Changa Safari, I say think about something like Sinbad or a Prince of Persia, but it's in an African setting. So it's a way to kind of give people some kind of something to relate to as far as getting an idea of what the stories are about. And once they get into them, they find out that what we're saying is somewhat true, but we really take them into the culture. We don't you know, like use a little bit. We take you, if you read any of Charles' books, you read any of my books, we really get into African culture, because what we want to do, part of what we want to do, and I have to say there is an ulterior motive to what we do. We want to get people interested in African history and culture, and the best way to do that is to give them a character to relate to. I can sit up here and talk to you about the Kingdom of Mali and Burkina Faso and places like that, and you'll sit there and your eyes will glaze over. But if you read Meji Book 1 and you just love Ndoro, and you'll sit there and tell me, well, where'd you get this stuff from Ndoro? And then I start talking about the Zulu and people like that. Then you're listening to it. Not because it's about the Zulu, but it's because it's about Ndoro. And you want to know all about Ndoro. And so there's kind of a, giving my secret away, there is an ulterior motive to the books that we write, is to get people interested. I feel like you've entertained and educated. So we entertain you, you have a good time, a good ride, but then once the story's over with and you want to know more, and that's when you're open to the education. Every meeting we do, every book signing we do, always ends up in a discussion about African history and culture. we always get away from the characters and we start talking about, you know, the different kingdoms, like I said, like Mali and and we start talking about Songhai and Ghana and, you know, and the Hausa states and the Yoruba city states, you know, and it's all because of the fact that the people can relate to it now because it's about somebody that they care about.
So just to expound on what you were saying, or jump on the back of what you were saying, it sounds like the type of book that I'd definitely be interested in. Mine is, again, more like fantasy, slice of life, and it's more from a peace perspective. I tend to always put peace principles in everything. And I'm thinking. And just thinking of what, that was the thing about science fiction also. And I would think that what you're, even all of our writings, at some point we're giving the message, of course, that we have within that we'd like to get out. And we just have different pathways of doing the same thing. And so I tend to come from a perspective of looking at the planet and the inhabitants of this ball that's spinning around in space, and what are some of the things that are going on simultaneously.
Excellent. And our final question, and then we will have questions from the guests in the audience. What current and upcoming projects do you all have going on?
Well, I'm going to be working on a workbook and a second part to go with Small Town Planet Earth. The workbook is going to give examples of how to, again, live life without letting fear be a guide, different paths or different techniques that you can utilize to get bypass fear, to realize it has this place. It's not about making it disappear. It's acknowledging its existence and letting it do its job, but not letting it be major. And the premise of Small Town Planet Earth basically it's a ladder that's standing by itself, and there's an antagonist that comes in at the end, but it's the catalyst to a series. And I've had enough people ask me about the series that I will begin that. But the other project is my play Lives. I had a performance read, and I believe it's getting ready to go to stage. So within the next couple of months, I just had a meeting, and the people are interested in taking that to the next level. So and I also do I'm working on a peace poetry project. The long-term dream is to create peace ambassadors, starting with youth and moving on to adults.
My next project